Trump is letting Canada like leave the nest. You know, he's like, instead of giving Canada a fish, he's teaching Canada to fish.
He was faking the 51st state stuff to get him to
them off their ass.
Because he was like, you guys,
taking them out of the house.
You got to grow up, Canada.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
The model
March
of ChatGPT has to be
Things
changed
are
into
getting
authentic
crazy
behavior,
in this
because otherwise
country,
it's
and I
not
don't
basically able to
know
match
what
up the
how
values
by the
of
Canadians.
different
They just
users in
have to
different
let go.
situations.
And this is why
Welcome to
Doug,
Lemonade Stand, everybody. What are we talking about today, Aiden?
I thought that was really clear. We just all put it out.
Yeah, done.
That's true. It's parallelism. You just get more done faster.
You just mute one of the audio tracks, which I'm
track.
sure we'll separately release, and it's the efficiency of the podcast, really.
One ear is each.
This is how you stop people in the comments being like they're talking over each other, interrupting each other. We just all speak at the same time.
If we just do it all the time for every episode, then it'll be fine. I think if you listen to all three of those tracks at the same time and also go to sleep, you'll wake up having retained them all.
I think it opens a pentagram to hell.
Where you have to listen to us three explain everything.
That's where Lemonade Stand explains things. Welcome back to the show. We have some big topics today.
Yeah, we are covering.
Happen?
Oh, a few things. Well, we're going to be covering Trump's, I believe, perfect record of first 100 days in office. No blights. I think that'll be pretty short. The Canadian election that just concluded a few days ago, and I just came reporting boots on the ground.
You were in the coup,
from
as we
Canada
call
this
it.
morning. The coup. I want to be so clear.
Yeah.
Nobody calls it that. Americans keep saying the coup around me, and I'm like, you can't say
Real
It's
Canadian allies like me. People building the olive branch. I think we call it the
Nothing says
coup.
being a Canadian ally like renaming their
Yeah, like
cities for them.
bullying them with a nickname, like a locker room.
And how the AI is just glazing us too much, especially net spend. They don't know what that means.
I don't know what that means.
And we're going to move on.
We're too old. Wait, remind me, are you a Couvlet or did you grow up somewhere else?
I was born in Vancouver, but I grew up in a different Canadian city.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
You know your way around the coup.
Oh, yeah.
I want to talk about the greatest president this country has ever seen, Donald J. Trump, and his first one. I'm in the villain chair.
You know what it reminds me? You know what it reminds me of is when Vivek Ramaswamy was campaigning, and he would always be like, "Donald Trump is the greatest American president of the 21st century," and it sounds so bold and brash, and then you're like, "There's been like
only
3 or 4. It's not that big of a deal."
3,
So
4.
It's such a smart way of him being like, "I am going to call him the best
Of
ever."
the
Well, I'm
2025s.
clearly not doing that.
No, I want to, there's a lot of opinions on this, and we want to get stuff from from comments as well. But it has been 100 days of this new administration, and it has been radically different, not only from previous administrations in our lives, but even from his own previous administration.
Yeah.
The Republicans are noticing this. And I want us to all kind of take a look at what we've seen in the past 100 days and give some feedback. But I'll start with a quick look at what happened. So he did a rally in Michigan. It's back to rally mode. Talking about 100 days of greatness. And I have the thing here. I don't know if Perry, we can pull this up. You got the YMCA.
Damn,
He's doing the dance.
I love it.
Does
I
the
will say
dances?
one thing I like about Trump, it's this move.
Yeah.
It's this
the
move
golf
that
swing
he does.
too that he does.
If I could keep a couple things.
Obama didn't have that.
Obama didn't do this one time.
But 100 days in, so he's doing this rally, and he basically came out there and said, it's been 100 days of the golden age. And actually 100 days ago when he first got inaugurated, he said, we're going to enter a golden age of America. We're going to have incredible jobs. We're going to have incredible security. And as we look at all of these issues and the polling, he is underwater on all of them as of 100 days. And he's behind where he was in the previous administration. He's behind, I believe, I'm going to pull this up, every president ever in the 100-day polling. He's the yellow line here.
Well, I think the only, is it the only person or the only term that he isn't doing worse than is his first term, right? Overall,
no, he is doing worse than his first term.
Isn't his overall approval rating right now better than it was during his first term?
My
His
understanding
overall
is it's
approval?
worse. Maybe you saw that in the NYT. Maybe I'm looking at a different poll. But
It might be a different poll. I'm not sure. But
my poll has him worse than his previous administration.
okay.
Yeah, those are the headlines I've read as well, which, I didn't dive into it deeply, but the consensus is this is the worst.
Yeah.
And by the way, this just jives with my experience. I'm just going to tell you how I feel on this, which is like in the first administration, he was chaotic on Twitter, but it felt like there was a lot of, I don't know, center-right people in his administration who were holding him back from possibly his worst impulses. I mean, there's a story from the Bob Woodward book where somebody saw that he was going to tear up our trade deal with South Korea. So they came into his office and stole it off his desk. And he didn't remember it and never followed up. And so that no longer exists in this administration. He's got pretty much, you talked about
that's actually how things work.
Glazing him. We're talking about glazing a lot today, but
Yeah.
I want to skip ahead here and just talk, because that reminds me.
Microphone.
Oh, microphone. Yeah,
I'm not even kidding. That's similar to how you deal with things with Ludwig sometimes.
Where you have to put a compliment in first.
You just, Ludwig,
you're so great.
Love you, bud. And you sneak the paper off his desk and then he forgets about it.
Wow.
He's going to listen to this.
Yeah. I mean, again, and that is what I just feel like I'm maybe I'm going crazy or something, but I feel like we can all see that this feels a little psychophantic. It feels a little weird. And the reason that made me think I was not crazy was Ann Coulter. And if you don't know who this is, like the most far right talking head woman was like, would it be possible to have a cabinet meeting without Kim Jong-il style tributes? And she's talking about this, and I want to watch this clip.
Pam?
President, your first 100 days has far exceeded that of any other presidency in this country, ever. Never seen anything like it. Thank you.
And it just, every cabinet meeting opens with everybody they have to open every sentence with how great he is, how incredible this time is. And they're all in front of like custom, I think, Gulf of America MAGA merch.
Oh
my
God.
Table.
It's like Mr. President, you have eaten the most broccoli I've ever seen. You're such a good boy. Like this is insane to me. These people, this is a real behavior. This is how you act around people who like emotionally abuse you.
Yeah, who are going to snap or take it out on you. And everyone has to smile and nod along. I know some of the people at that table are smart, but like it just feels, and we have so many real problems that are getting more and more real, many of them self-inflicted during this 100 days. And so I'm getting more and more upset. Like I'm generally a jokey channel about this stuff, but as of late, around this 100-day mark, I feel like it's not fun to live through. Where I'm getting annoyed with it. I'm getting like, and again, you know, my main thing and the voters' main thing at the beginning of this 100 days was the economy. And I'm bringing up this chart because I think it's so important. You know, he ran on two main things, I guess, was the economy and immigration. And immigration is finally now underwater, but he was popular on it for some time. And I can understand people have different opinions on that than me. But on the economy, Americans are almost universally agreeing. He's hearing a supermajority of negative opinion on his handling of the economy, in that jobs are getting more scarce, cost of living is going up, the trade deals with every country are not seeming to be made, the tariffs are at least in the short term, making everything more expensive. And I guess I just want to know, am I missing something here? Because it feels like this is not a golden age.
One wild thing to me was immigration specifically, because I feel like people who voted for him on the basis of his immigration policy, from what the talking points around that issue was, if you were a Trump supporter, I feel like that should have been such a layup for him. Do you know what I mean? Like, I obviously don't agree personally with his rhetoric around immigration or the way that he has chosen to handle things, but I feel like if you're someone who is sold on his message leading into the election, I'm surprised that even that is on the negative among all of these issues. That was one thing that stood out to me.
Yeah.
It's the least negative of all of these things that you've laid out here, right? And but that one was surprised me. I do wonder, because there were a few specific issues that were brought up, at least in the I think the Times / what was the institution that worked with the Times on the poll? I don't remember. But they one of the issues was specifically the Abrego Garcia case that we've already discussed on this show, and we've discussed off the show a good bit too. And that one is, I think it's maybe 60%, almost 70% of people disapprove of the way that he's handled that issue, even among Republicans. And there is a giant pushback on that specific issue. So I wonder if things like that play into even the immigration part falling off here.
It feels to me like with these categories of what he ran on and what was important to the base, which is, let's say, immigration, economy, these other, you know, maybe culture war type stuff.
Yeah.
With immigration, he's like, their whole thing with the first 100 days, they've gone extremely, extremely fast, right? Like everybody agrees on that. It's been like ridiculously rapid. And so they've just done tons of executive orders. They've done all this stuff. There's an interesting Bloomberg article, if, you know, Perry pull this up, that talks about the dizzying 100 days. And I guess like when Stephen Miller, who's the chief of staff, I believe, right? When he left in 2021, like they came up with this blueprint of like, okay, when we get back in again, we are going to go just ultra fast and go through everything, right? And just like have this like blitz strategy that is hard to, you know, I guess push back on or, you know, go against the normal pacing that government works.
Yeah.
So it sounds like this is very deliberate.
Yeah, there was a name for I think Bannon called it the shotgun strategy or something. This idea that if you just pump out changes and ideas so quickly all the time, every day, if you're hitting the media and people with three new major changes every day, it's really hard for the public to keep up.
Yeah, so there's a great example, which is flood the zone. So that's, I guess, the terminology. So they talked about Liberation Day, massive tariffs, and then on April 19th, he announces he's going to like put a pause on the tariffs, right? And so suddenly it's like, okay, we're going back, which is like absolutely massive for the economy and the global, like the global ecosystem. So much. And then later that day, he starts talking about the repeal of shower head water flow limitation. And so he just like, in that same day, he's talking about this. And there's a few quotes. This is like hours after doing this massively consequential decision on all these crazy ass tariffs. Nobody knows what's going on. And then he says, I have to stand under the shower for 15 minutes until it gets wet. He complained to the reporters in the Oval Office. It comes out, drip, drip, drip. It's ridiculous. And then Trump said that the water pressure curbs make it difficult to wash his beautiful hair, in quotes. And it's just like, so this is the same day that they're doing this like wild roller coaster on tariffs, which is like this massive, massive impact on the economy. And like that strategy, I guess, is very deliberate of just like tons of stuff happening really, really quickly.
So I got a quote from our viewers. This is on YouTube from a Trump voter. Okay, and I wanted to pull this up.
While you're pulling that up, it's same thing. It reminds me of like last week or the week before, he announced that he's putting up 2 gigantic American flags outside the White House. And he's putting them up. He's like, he's talking to the press. He's like, they're gonna be big, beautiful flags. They're gonna be waving proudly, and everybody's gonna love him. And somebody's like, Trump, what do you think about the tariffs going on? Canada says they're gonna, and then he cuts her off and says, I'm gonna pay for it with my own money. They're gonna be beautiful flags. That's not
the question being asked.
It's just like the most like flood the news kind of shit. It's so insane.
Here's what he said. Trump voter here. This is our comments.
Yeah.
Figure I can give some political insights from a not super informed voter. I like the idea of tariffs and the idea of slashing spending, though I personally voted because of abortion, etc. So cultural issues, okay?
Okay.
But my main issue with Trump so far is the way he is doing everything. What they are doing should be happening 2 years from now after a ton of research and expertise was leveraged to see which countries needed tariffs, which agencies are wasting money, how much the military spending we can tone down. Instead, they seem to be walking around blowing stuff up as they please and causing more chaos than improvement. How you do something is almost more important than what you do. And that is even from like, I think I read a good mix of sources, including people that voted for Trump, people that didn't. And what I'm seeing from the people that I trust, people I think are good thinkers, even if they voted for Trump, is that this is chaos. It's just chaos top to bottom. There's no seemingly strategy to everything. Everything seems to be fly by night, changing willy-nilly. And so I have found this 100 days to be, at least in my lifetime, drastically worse than anything I've seen.
It's the worst one I've seen in the 21st century of any president.
In the 2025.
Yeah.
No, I think in my whole life, I can't think of anything where so much has changed and I can't see much for the better.
It is genuinely hard to figure out what is even going on. Yeah.
I think the interpretations of, there is still this person or this version of people that is fighting for this idea of, oh, this is the 4D chess master plan that is coming together through all of these decisions. This is the direction we're pushing in. I think one example, I'd been sent a clip from the All In podcast, and they had a guest on that they're asking, and he's giving kind of his best attempt at steel manning what's going on right now. And I thought it was interesting because even his attempt and his explanation in the clip seems shaky. Like he doesn't believe, he has a hard time putting this argument together, but his idea is that through these tariffs and economic changes and also a reduction in income taxes, we're going to promote a bunch of spending within the United States and build industry within the United States, and then switch to consumption-based taxes, not just the tariffs meant to replace income taxes, but increasing things like sales taxes. And maybe, was it value-added taxes as well? But his point is that switching from an income tax system to a consumption tax system, and you leave all the income in the system for people to spend and invest as they please, which is, I would say, a longer-winded version of, you know, this trickle-down economics idea where you like cut taxes and you hope that investment accumulates over time, right? But even this guy on All In, who's being asked to come up with the best case scenario out of everything that's gone on in the past few months, is having a hard time putting this argument together. And I wouldn't call, I don't think All In has a particularly like liberal or like left audience, you know? Like I feel like the audience listening to All In is, there's a pretty big range of people listening to that show. And it has a lot of people that vote conservative or voted for Trump who listen to it. And everybody in the comments of this clip is like, this doesn't make any sense. Yeah. Like this guy is not explaining it well. This has a ton of holes in it. I don't agree with it. Like, I don't agree with this at all. Like, so it's interesting to go to a place like that where I think maybe if you went back a few months ago and you listened to discussions around the economy in a place like the comments of All In, you'd see people more hopeful. People that are on All In, I think, voted for Trump, right? And some of them, I forget his name on the show, but like notably switched from being like a major Democratic donor to a major Trump donor within the span of this election. Yeah. And I think it's interesting to go back to a space like that and see how the discussion has changed in light of the results of the 100 days.
Well, okay, quick pushing back on that.
Yeah.
So All In has typically 4 hosts because I've listened to them over the years. One of them is like left leaning. Two of them were sort of center, and one was right leaning.
Yeah.
So I guess you could, if you pull it up, like, so Jason is the host. He's moved from like more left to more center, and then Chamath was more center. He moved farther right. Friedberg is still in the middle, and then David Sachs already was very conservative before and was like a very strong conservative voice. Yeah. And now he is part of the Trump administration. So,
wow.
Yes. So he is like, you know, I don't know which guest you're talking about. I don't catch
I don't know
that
if
many
it's this
episodes
specific
anymore.
episode. Yeah.
Yeah. But, you know, like if you want a perspective of why the Trump plan is working, like both Chamath and David Sachs are pretty strong proponents of it. So, they vocalize that.
So I've seen them themselves in a different episode still kind of fight to defend his position.
They
right
are
now.
still, I would argue the podcast has become much more right leaning and supportive of that viewpoint. So at least 2 of the 4 are still very much like, this is a good idea, and they're arguing for it. But it feels like everybody else outside of the immediate orbit of like Trump's cabinet and close advisors, it feels like the rest of the world is kind of like, this is too much.
Yeah, I think it's less to remark on the static host's opinions about things, and more that I think because of the positions that they hold and the things they talk about on the show, the community discussion that they have, seeing the way that has morphed and changed over time, specifically in the last few months, is interesting.
Yeah, definitely.
And I do want to say, in the presentation of the data that we're talking about here, this first big 100-day poll, at least the New York Times one that I had looked at, they do note that if you look at people who voted for Trump only, on the whole, there isn't this sea of Trump voters who regret their decision right now. I think that is like an overplayed narrative of like a big part of his base regrets voting for him. It's more like all of the independents and moderates that were pulled over, which is a good enough amount of people that he won the popular vote, right? They are the people that, as a result of the 100 days, are changing their minds.
I want to hit on that after.
Okay, I just want to say we have a deeply polarized country, and of course there's going to be a base on either side who are lockstep whatever it is, they ride or die with it.
Right.
But the reason this election was such a surprise, and the reason he won the popular vote, and the reason was because there's this big wave of people in the middle who I think largely were upset about the economy. They were upset about inflation, and they switched over. And there's a couple other things, and I think he made a passionate case about immigration, even if I disagree with it, that got people thinking there was a big problem with violent crime and immigration that had to be solved. But the way he's solving even that problem has got most people, if you look at the polling, upset, especially the people who are part of that coalition that won. So it feels like that coalition and that idea of a day one golden age is evaporating. And I know not all of that. I mean, I'll give you a response for it because I want to talk about the stock market and other things, but I guess it's really just that. It's so actually, if we pull up your chart again, so if we go through like the kind of, some of the key areas that he campaigned on. And this chart, by the way, is Aiden, you can see it. 2025.
Yeah, I see
that's approval rating.
It catches up and then crosses over with his old term.
Yeah. So it's what's interesting is he to win the election, like you said, got this broad swath of people in the middle, right, to vote for him. And I think economy, immigration, culture were all part of them. And probably, really economy was the main one.
Number one. And by all polling, they say,
right.
Yeah.
So like by far that, and then immigration was the number two. And then the way they've gone about handling these things is so if I think if he had come out and said, we need tariffs on China, we need specialized focused tariffs like we'd talk about, that you can make a very compelling case for that. And as I've listened to more and more and more people from all sides talk about tariffs, basically everybody's like, look, if these had been really focused, what the conversation has done has made people be far more aware of the trade imbalances and national security challenges that come from the current way we trade with China. For example, not having any rare earth is a big problem if you want your country to have security. So like it brought that up. So I think there's absolutely a way that the Trump admin could have presented that and said, hey, let's do this focused approach. And instead it's this nuclear bomb on everything, right?
The
Same
comment
with immigration, right?
Yeah.
They go shut down the border. I think they could have said, we're going to shut down illegal immigration, increase legal immigration, which is by far the popular perspective and what people want. And instead they're doing these like crazy deportations, these high profile crazy things that like most people don't want that, right? And so it feels like across the board, the things that he campaigned on, he's doing them, but in such a bizarre, like in such an over the top way that you're losing people's ability to feel enthusiastic about it, which is just strange. It's all weird.
Yeah. And trust. And I would just say that I think this comment said it from a Trump voter said specifically, which is like the way you do things matters.
Right.
A lot. Execution matters. Having a cabinet that is willing to challenge you on things and is not blindly sycophantic in every meeting matters. I mean, all this stuff is just making me feel like it's difficult to see a route where the United States can solve its own problems, let alone be a leader among other nations, let alone and 4 years of this is spooky. I'm often pretty jokey about this, but as I've been reading over this 100 days, I just feel like this has been a pretty catastrophically bad start. And if you look at history, in the first 100 days, most presidents get a pass. Like a lot of things you can do, even radical change things, the polling doesn't move that much. I predict if this course stays, especially as the impact from the tariff hasn't even felt yet, these polling numbers are going to be catastrophically bad. As we get past the honeymoon phase and into if we continue to see, I got numbers here, but employment dropping, GDP dropping, personal consumption dropping, you can see it all here. Inflation up. Like these are all things this is what everyone was screaming for number one to fix. And they're not being fixed. They're getting worse. And, it's fun. This is not the best time to be like also shitting on the Democrats, but like this is the ultimate political opportunity. They've been given the ultimate. He is fucking up on so many of the things he talked about. And it's shocking to see so little leadership out of, I would love to see a better, I feel like there's no platform or stand. I don't know.
I do feel so little political movement on that side of the aisle. Like the only thing I think has made it to me is Bernie and AOC are doing rallies together. And as exciting as that is, right? Like, oh, someone capitalizing that and like being able to pull out thousands of people at rallies for something that isn't even a campaign. I don't think Bernie is going to run in 2028. He's too, to be honest with you, I think he's too old. He's just too old and he needs to be, it just needs to be somebody else. And I don't feel like someone else, like AOC is going to a lot of those with him, but I don't think any person is stepping up to that position right now. Like there's this huge void that is just begging for someone to step up and be the guy on
Dude,
the
I
other
was looking
side.
at the
And
poly market.
It's nobody.
I was looking at the poly market of like the prediction odds, the betting odds on who will be the nominee in 28 for Democrats. And number one on this is still Kamala Harris. There's no way on earth they should run Kamala Harris again. It's crazy. I mean, I guess I'm just worried that this ultimate opportunity is going to be completely own gold. But
I'm curious if you guys feel this way. I think part of why they've struggled with this, as somebody who's not a political expert, right?
Me neither.
But is that the campaign has been so focused on Trump bad. Here's all the bad things about Trump. And I feel like I have not seen a Democratic leader that inspires me with here's a vision for the future that is better, rather than at least 50% of the dialogue being here's why Trump is bad. And I don't think that works anymore. Like it didn't work in 2016. It did work with Joe Biden, and then it didn't work this last one. And I feel like the stuff I've seen from Democrats, which is admittedly not deeply diving, but I think it's actually illustrative of somebody of like, what is reaching me? And it's like Bernie Sanders, AOC doing rallies. Okay, great. But it's largely about Trump being a piece of shit. And like, sure, I don't like so much of what he's doing. But like, there needs to be more. There needs to be a vision for what the Democrats are offering specifically, not just we aren't Trump. I just don't feel like that works anymore. I'm just not hearing a coherent message. I think that's maybe why Abundance, the book, resonated with me, because I was like, this feels like more of a platform, but I haven't heard a Democratic leader come out and say, this is concretely what we want to do. And it's just been, hey, we have to fight against Trump. And I don't know that that resonates with people anymore.
I will say,
I would be very curious your thoughts. Yeah.
Because you said it didn't work the first time. It did work in 2020 and it didn't work the last time. I agree with that 100%. I think it works after people experience it.
Yes. Yeah. Which is, we'll talk about with Canada.
Work this time.
No, with Canada, Canada got to experience Trump and he flipped the entire fucking election, right? And so it's like, there's no way he would win again, for instance, because everybody would hate him. But that's even more so, right? Like he's not running again. Asterisk.
Yeah.
So like what I think Democrats should be doing is really focusing on how are we offering this amazing future in 2028 and beyond. And instead it's still just Donald Trump bad. And I'm sure there is more nuance, but that's all I'm hearing. And it's like, dude, we gotta have more, from anybody. Trump is just, it's shocking and sad how thoroughly he dominates the conversation with everything.
I genuinely agree with you. For this previous election, I would say right now, pointing out the bad things is not necessarily a bad political strategy.
No,
just because
of course not.
People are feeling it and it's not working. So
it's like the third round of this.
But
right?
I agree. It is exhausting to live in this country.
Like there has to be more on top of that. It's not like obviously like the tariff. Anyway, there's so many things to complain about what he's doing, and those should be addressed and like fight back and all that. But like it didn't feel like there was any life in the Democratic Party until Trump started doing this crazy shit, and now they're rallying against it. That shouldn't be the only impetus for rallying a movement together, is that there's some guy doing crazy shit, rather than you have genuine leadership that is inspiring people, irrespective of what Donald Trump is doing.
And I'm hopeful, man. I mean, in America, we didn't get FDR until we had Hoover, and I do think that like,
Trump is probably single-handedly going to swing things way the fuck to the left.
He might do something crazy.
It's wild.
I'm not out of that line of thought.
I do want to reply to a couple things you said. So
get in the mix.
Because one of my criticisms of Abundance, the book, is the lack of connection for what it's talking about to actionable, not policy steps, but actionable ways you could support these types of things in the political sphere.
Yes,
like the message is really hard to the idea behind the book of like, let's analyze issues and enhance state capacity as best as possible to deal with them. Not a very great campaign slogan. And I think that allows people also who are scrutinizing it to interpret it in whatever way they see negatively too.
Rather than a really coalesced movement towards something specific.
Like the most common left-leaning criticism of the message of the book that I see is like, it wants to outsource everything to private corporations, and that's how we should like make and build things, which is I don't think what the book says at all. But I think that ambiguity and my criticism of the book is like, okay, I read this thing with a bunch of ideas and examples of how the government has empowered institutions and people in the past to build amazing stuff, and we'd like to do that in the future. how do you turn that into like a cohesive political message? I think one thing that oh yeah.
Can I say something? Because I think that is how it generally works, right? He's not a politician. So he's writing an idea.
Sure.
It's like Keynes. We're reading the Keynes book.
I agree.
He writes
I mean,
things,
it's not
and then a
necessarily
politician takes that and makes it their like the politician's job is to take those ideas and make them palatable and understandable and sloganable for regular people. And
it's not his job to do
I think
all of that
maybe
part
we're
of the
just
work.
desperate for it.
Nobody is necessarily stepping up to like grab that messaging. At least
actually, no, it is Pete Buttigieg. He's been
did a
doing
good job on
to
Flagrant podcast, right? He was on the,
I saw like clips of that. He's been doing a bunch of stuff.
Yeah.
And he's actually voicing things really, really well. And I don't know if he's trying to be president again or whatnot, but
he definitely is.
He's the one politician I've heard of where it's like he has a more coherent vision for what's going on and incorporates some of those ideas and then also pushes back on some. And that's like the one thing where it feels like this is a vision for the future, not just Trump is bad, you know?
I agree with that. And I actually think your example of the Bernie rallies, for instance, I think the inflection point for something like that is definitely Trump, like Trump bad, hate Trump. Like that's the reason that people are riled up and going to these things initially. And that's the energy that you have to take advantage of.
Right. And then divert that into something.
His message is super consistent and strong as it's always been. I think there's also criticisms of like, okay, how do you deploy the things that Bernie is advocating for? I actually think the issue more so is maybe the branding and image and like how long he's been in that position in politics now. Like the fact that you feel that way about Bernie's rally is part of the issue to me, not necessarily to fault you, but that when you've been the same guy in the same position for so long that's lost along the way, and I won't delve into the details of like why I think he lost along the way as well, but I think either way, he did lose up until this point. Yeah. And you have to contend with the fact that like this guy in his 80s, no matter how consistent and strong the message is of, anti-corporation, like working class, like these are the types of like policies and things we should fight for in America and like what we should build. I think it needs to be behind a new face. And that's what I would be looking for is like the guy there needs to be a new guy. Maybe Pete Buttigieg is trying to be that guy right now from the media he's trying to do, right? Somebody to step up and synthesize a lot of the messaging that we're looking for as people like in our position, like who's going to fill this void to be the next guy.
It's just shock. Like we watch this clip. It's just shocking the standard we're asking for though, because what Buttigieg is going to do here is talk normally like a normal person explaining an idea. And if you listen to any of these Trump clips we're watching, we're talking about the big, beautiful flags or whatever. He is not going in depth on anything. There's not one issue I'm listening to him talk about where he personally, maybe JD Vance sometimes, maybe Chamath sometimes, maybe there's somebody, maybe Scott Bessent sometimes will say something that sounds to me somewhat reasonable and explainable, but he is never doing that, not once.
I think the reason that's the case also is I do think from what we've seen, I think if I was to lose my charitability and I would say Trump seems to be making a bunch of flippant decisions. You just described an anecdote where a paper was removed from his desk about a geopolitical issue and then he forgot about it because of that. It's like when that guy is at the helm, the other people who are able to explain things around him just take whatever actions that are output and then do whatever they can to explain them away.
Yes.
Even if they're articulate.
And they're conflicting. I mean, he has people in his cabinet like Bessent and Navarro and all these people who have different, they're answering different, Howard Lutnick. They're giving different answers on what these trade policies are for.
Yeah.
And whoever he meets with last is the one he's parroting. So I'm past the point of charitability on it. And while I do agree, I feel a little bad that we're ripping into the difficulties Buttigieg is having or Bernie's having, because it feels like the standard is so much higher. Well, I agree that they should all, anyway, that's
I mean, it's demagoguery versus like a really coherent, boring plan. And, and it's like, how do you mix those together? For specifically, if you pull up the iPad really quickly with the Bernie Sanders rally. So I was watching like 5 or 6 minutes of this yesterday. I didn't watch the whole thing, but so he has a video to our establishment friends in the Democratic Party where he's specifically talking about actionable things to Democrats about how people are going to fight back and what's going to happen and all this stuff. And this is the type of thing that I think is great. Like he's communicating clearly about what should go on, but it takes several minutes to get to the point where he's not just talking about Trump. Sure. And I think that's the concern for me is like, I don't know that starting your messaging with that is going to rally people anymore, because that has been the dialogue for years, literally 12 years. Yeah, it's been nonstop Trump for 12 years, and
So you want to just like break through to the meat and potatoes. You would just want to get to like, okay, we all agreed that this is bad, or we're at a time where we all
know
agree
this is bad. Here's the specific steps we want to do, which he gets to. But again, it's like I just wish, and this is probably naive, and I just want to I'm just like solutions type of person. And I know that's not what inspires people, but it does make me wonder of like, at the very least, something needs to change from what happened over the past 4 years, because if the Democrats want to win at all, like I just don't. Yeah.
I agree, except that I think, assuming we have normal elections, I do think based on this polling, they can run a lot of different ideas and people and still win. I think this is going to be poor. And so, what it means is a good opportunity for someone with a real plan for change to step up, because they could landslide. I mean, they could get a real mandate to make real change.
I think in this vein of discussion right now, it actually segues easily into the Canadian election, because that version or that guy, I think that we're talking about right now, I think just won. Is the head of the Liberal Party. And
we're talking about Carn Dog?
Carn Dog. I did have one quick question. Okay. I wanted to ask Doug, could you pull up the All In clip one more time? The video you pulled up?
Yeah. Oh, and while that's happening, I do want to point out, like, if what I'd be curious about, if you feel like you are hearing a lot of like coherent messaging from the Democratic Party that is really a clear, like, this is what our plan is. I would be interested to hear that. I feel like I'm not seeing that anywhere of somebody who tries to stay like relatively abreast of things. And so maybe it's just like not reaching me, but it's like what you said. I feel like it's Bernie and AOC and maybe a bit of Pete Buttigieg. And that's like the primary messaging that's coming around. And it's mostly about Trump. And that's been.
It'd be nice to hear what people think is actually breaking through, if anything. Right.
Yeah.
The other thing I want to hear is if, over half of the voting population in this country voted for Trump. If you are a voter that voted for Trump, I would love to hear your thoughts on, first of all, why, and then second of all, if it's followed up with what you imagined.
Yeah.
Because I want to hear more from that side of I want to hear more from voters and what their expectations were, and if they're happy with this, or if they can steel man some of the things that I'm maybe denigrating. Because I don't know. I can't see it.
Yeah. David, is it David Friedberg in the bottom right? Which of the guys... You were talking about their general positions. He's one of the hosts of the show. He's who the clip was about, and I just wanted to clarify that.
So I don't know who the top left is, but
the bottom right.
Bottom right is Friedberg. So he's great. I like him a lot. But yes, go ahead. Okay. As far as I can tell,
he was just the guy who was attempting to like steel man that argument.
Oh, that was him? Yeah. Oh, okay. Yeah. Then that's not great if he can't. Friedberg is for me like the voice of reason in the show that you can basically always trust to have a smart, intelligent take on things that's nuanced. And
I think he was trying to do his best to like defend like what the possible explanation of this could be, but it was hard for him because
that's not a good sign.
Yeah.
That's not a good sign.
Anyway, so we can just get right into the Canadian election if that's all right with you guys, or do you want to touch on one more thing?
I guess a very tiny thing. Yeah. I guess I wanted to say, I didn't include this because I don't think it is a great measure of the economy. But I did want to include that this is the worst 100 days for the stock market since Gerald Ford, which is in the 70s. Mm-hmm. And I wanted to bring that up because we're doing a stock market game where you, Aiden, and me we're the top three.
It's really about
we're eliminated. We're all positive. We're all green. Everyone else is deep red.
So it's really about who's in first, though.
You're not in first.
I'm in first.
Are you?
You're in first right
now? Checked it. Guess who moved into one, baby? Atrioc. His long reign is over. Fuck! Never mind. Top three. Top three. It's us up there. Us in the top three.
My long reign is not over, bro. Infinite. Yes.
On Friday last week, I was in first for the first time.
Okay. Can we just agree that, so for context, 5 of us put $10,000 into the stock market. We pick stocks, and we're going to see who has the most money. At the end of a year, we're going to donate all the profits to charity. Yeah. And right now, the 3 of us are leading over Stans and Ludwig, which I think means if you want financial success, you should listen to Lemonade Stand and not the Yard or Twitch.tv/Stans.
Well, you can listen to the Yard. Sorry. Yard's fine.
You can listen to 1/4 of the yard if you want to know how to deep sea mine.
And to be fair,
But,
most of Ludwig's losses are from Trump coin. He would be in 4th place if he had not picked Trump coin. Okay, real quick on stock market.
Yeah.
I would like to hear your thoughts as you know, you're kind of the stock czar of this podcast. We often call you.
He's the stock guy.
Stock guy.
Stock guy.
On and off the pod.
No, I like it. The stock king. Stock terrorist.
Perry, if you can pull up the Candy Crush Saga.
No,
where did we put stuff? Okay, here we go. So S&P 500, right? One of the measures of the stock market broadly.
Yeah.
We've been talking about how it goes up and down and everybody's like freaking out about it every week.
Yep.
And then if you go, to a year, wait, where's 1 year? 1 year. It's above where we were a year ago, substantially, right?
Oh, wild.
So it's like there's been all this chaos of the stock market over the past 2-3 months. But even at its like crazy low point when it like totally crashed, it went below 5,000. That was basically what it was 1 year ago. And now it's back up to what, 5,500? So objectively, it is up from a year ago substantially. It's just down from this ridiculous high that when Trump got there. So I'm curious.
Inauguration, I think, is like the
yeah. No. So I would
market
be curious to hear for you, like the perception is the economy is doing bad. Why do you feel like that is, given that on a longer time scale, it seems to? I mean,
again, that's why
I
was tentative to bring in the stock market, because I think the stock market and the economy are obviously two different things. They've become divorced from each other. This is a complaint I had under Biden, and it's a complaint I have now, so it's not changing dramatically. I think to zoom out to a year and not really, I mean, some of the big things we're talking about happened in April. The Liberation Day began in April. So I think the time frame we're talking about, we have even only barely begun to see the impacts of that. Like most companies haven't even done their earnings for the quarter in which tariffs have begun to apply.
Yeah,
that makes sense.
We're not even close to seeing the full breadth. And as I see trade deals begin to unravel with all of our major partners, as I see, we talked about the ports emptying in California and in Korea and in China, and trucking jobs drying up. I think, I'd hate to do the day-to-day stock market and say, well, we're fine, we're good. I would say CEOs have mentioned the word chaos more in their earnings reports than ever. They've mentioned uncertainty. They've mentioned tariffs. And all of these things are only beginning to factor in. And I think we've been in an environment of higher risk. Not necessarily that everything is immediately blown up under his administration, but he has put this huge chaos uncertainty premium you have to add to every American valued stock, bond, real estate that requires pricing in a little buffer room for his chaos.
So do you feel like that's why, because we looked at that chart and the perception of people on the economy is very negative in his first 100 days. So what do you think accounts for that then?
I think that is people in real life recognizing that it's harder to find a good quality job. They are finding that pricing of goods is getting more and more out of reach. Their wages are not keeping up.
Right.
And I think that is what they complained about under Biden. That's what they're complaining about even more now.
So it's just that he hasn't improved these things that he said he was going to improve. They're still really
I think he's
challenging.
made them worse. That's what I'm sort of bringing up. And I have this chart here that I think is worth bringing up, Perry, if you can show. This is green is how Americans thought how important this issue was right before the election. And blue is how important they think it is now. Number one was crime, and number two was the economy in 2024. Now crime has dropped from 53 to 47, and the economy has only gotten more important. The things that were already deeply important around the election have only gotten more. Like we've been getting more extreme. People have considered the economy even more important than before, and they're screaming for it to get fixed. And it looks like this is not only not fixing it, but heading in the wrong direction. I think that's why it's so important.
Interesting.
I think even if you took like a basic thing too, is even if you were locked into the stock market and that was the most important thing to you, right? And understandably so, say you're about to retire, like you think you're going to retire this year or next year, and you're worried about how the stock market is affecting your investments. I think there's just loss aversion too. Like this is a psychological phenomenon where it hurts way more to lose than it feels.
Yeah, because it did go up and then down.
Yeah. So for anyone where the stock market weighs specifically, I think people just feel that pain. But all of these more measurable things on day-to-day life of working class people are measurably getting worse right now.
And I want to say for like, there's a half Americans don't have stocks at all, right? And so them doesn't matter really. They feel the effects downstream. But also there's a good chunk of what remains of the middle class of America who has stocks in their 401k. And I'm thinking specifically of my dad. My dad was talking to me about it. And he's like, every time the stock market goes down 7%, 8%, he is literally seeing more years that he has to work before he can retire. Because that is his real world experience of seeing that. So, you know, you might go down 5%. And if we're playing it as a joke or as a game, we don't feel it. But and I think a lot of Americans, especially the ones about to retire, feel it that way. And they cut back on spending. And the effects of that have not become felt yet, but I think they're about to be. So, that's where I'm at with the economy. I just think I'm upset with how it's been handled in a way that's making me more and more like, I think less funny on stream. Like I used to joke about it because it was easier to joke about when it was not getting so real. I think it's getting more real. And I think in May and June and July, we're going to start really feeling it in a way that people are not going to want to laugh about. So I'm trying to get my jokes out.
Yeah. Well, I think last year there are a lot of negative things you could point to, or maybe things you were looking at in the future. But then as we're going through this 100 days, there's more actions that have actually been taken, and we're looking at the results of them. We're not just guessing at like what it might be happening next year anymore, which is also part of it. I think.
Love for it to just not be as chaotic, and then there's like a plan. It's like, here's the plan, because then you could be like, oh, this plan is having this effect, but we have no idea what's causing anything, right? Because tariffs change every week, and it's like, dude, that would be so great to be able to understand some concept of what might happen.
Who's got a plan in Canada?
I'm telling you, Doug,
Corn Dog?
I think you'll like Corn Dog.
Corn Dog.
Corn Dog strikes me as a man with a plan.
Okay.
So for those
I'm desperate for a plan,
those
I'm craving a plan. Give me a plan,
dude. I think the Canadians may be able to deliver it to you.
Okay.
I don't know if you're planning on moving there anytime soon, but
I don't know if Corn Dog can get me to move to Couve.
the Couve.
Yeah.
If we get enough Americans to immigrate to Vancouver and call
We
it the
can change
Couve,
it
then
to-
we can just change, dude. And I'm sure that's what they want right now.
I'm running a cool experiment, kind of like that we did with the stocks, like see what happens.
Yeah.
Me and my brother, he went to Canada and lives there now. I lived here, and we'll see whose mental health is worse in 4 years.
Well, he moved to Vancouver, right?
Yeah, to the Couve.
Almost certainly his. Almost certainly his is going to be worse. You need something to normalize for seasonal depressive disorder.
And buying a house.
It's just and buying a house. Yeah. I think to get into this a bit, if for those who haven't been following, the Canadian elections just happened. And their political system is a bit different from ours. I'm not going to spend a bunch of time explaining the differences, but just know they vote for parties, and then whoever is at the head of that party, the majority party or the party that gets the most votes is who becomes prime minister. And I think there's been a bunch of talk in America about Canadian politics more than normal because of all of the rhetoric from Trump around Canada, 51st state, let's let the tariffs. And also, I think Trudeau has been a figure in American politics a bit when he announced his resignation. So for those who don't know, the Liberal Party it just won the election. And Carney, Mark, did I mess up his name?
Mark Carney?
Mark Carney.
Mark Carney.
Yeah. Mark Carney is the Prime Minister of Canada. He was also the Prime Minister leading into the election. He was the person who took over the Liberal Party by quite a large margin, from my understanding, when Trudeau resigned.
Yeah, I got like 90% of the vote.
Yeah, and
crazy.
He was very well liked within that sphere, right?
Well, do you want to do, just a tiny bit before that, like the context of Trudeau being pretty deeply unpopular in Canada.
Absolutely.
The Liberal Party headed for disaster. And then he resigned, like basically in the way that Biden did, where it was like, you're not going to win. You need to get out of this party because you're taking us all with you. You're so unpopular. And
the crazy thing about this election was leading into it, Trudeau was very, very disliked. I cannot express to you that every single Canadian in my life, no matter where they fell on the political spectrum, disliked this guy.
Really?
Trudeau needed to go. I knew literally zero people that liked him. And that was my understanding for basically the past year or two, especially, is that he's very, very disliked. And that's why he was pressured to resign. And in the wake of that, the Liberals, also not a very liked party, as you can imagine, because he's the leader of that party.
Right.
And I think leading into this election, because people knew that there was an election on the horizon for a while, the Conservative Party, the other largest party in Canada, was expected to dominate this election.
20-point lead.
Like there's no chance the Liberals win. And going into this year, I think removing the Trump part from the equation, I think there's another part to this that I got from talking to people, was that Carney stepping up into this position of liberal leader actually changed people's minds by itself more than I think people think, and more than we've talked about in America. It was interesting because I talked to, in the past couple of days, I've talked to a handful of Canadian friends of various ages, live in various parts of Canada. And it was interesting to see how they all brought up how there seems to be a faith in Carney individually outside of the Trump changes that made people a little more confident in the Liberal Party to begin with. And I thought that was really interesting because in the American media in American groups of friends, I feel like that part is glazed over a lot. I think a lot of the things people say about this guy is that he's incredibly well studied, has like a good resume, super practical in his approach to things. My grandfather was one of the people I talked to, and he sent me this right before we started recording. Carney is very diplomatic, non-confrontational, and rational. The opposite of Mr. Trump, in my opinion. And it was interesting to see everybody echo these opinions, regardless of whether they stood politically. Because of the people I asked, I would say I asked friends who leaned a little more NDP, people who were liberals, and then somebody who was a conservative. And this opinion was echoed. And then also one friend who basically translated a lot of his friends. He works in Alberta, and he translated a lot of his coworkers' opinions, and they said they were all conservative. So it was interesting to see that thread across all of their explanations.
All of them said they were impressed by Carney.
Yeah, okay. that he is a big improvement.
A reasonable, serious person.
Yeah, and a huge step up from Trudeau, regardless of whether or
Trump
not
is doing his shit.
Trump had done any of this. None of them said that he would have won or the Liberals would have won without the actions of Trump. But it was, I think it's something important to know.
Can we just show the polling show? I do agree with you. I think Carney is a reasonable, serious person, and that definitely impacted it. Mm-hmm. But this is the polling. This is what you're talking about. So right around here, this is the blue party. It would be the Conservative Party. They have flipped colors in Canada.
Yeah, the red is liberal.
Yeah, the red is the liberal.
And
right here is where Trudeau resigns at the bottom here. And, or right around here, I think is maybe when Trump steps up. But you can see that it was over. I mean, everyone was predicting a complete and total collapse. And then Trump stepping up. I think there's no way to say this wasn't 80 to 90% Trump, right? Do they disagree with that?
No, it's not. I think they all talk about Trump's impact on this. I think the main reason they're mentioning or talking about Carney in this way, from what I gathered, was that if, say, Trudeau hadn't resigned.
Oh, yeah.
Then he still would have lost. And the fact that it was Carney in the wake of, Carney was seen as somebody who could stand up to the Trump bullshit, so to speak, in a way that people could actually stand behind and change their vote for. Because that's the big thing, right? A bunch of people who were going to vote conservative ended up changing their mind.
It's just funny that Trump is like, there is no speech, there is no politician, there is no one in Canada who could have done more for the Liberal Party than Trump.
Donald J. Trump.
Trump united the country. He swung votes. I mean, this is a miracle. This is like a 2-month span to go from down 20 points in the polls to winning. It's kind of incredible. And I talked to some Canadian friends. Oh, sorry.
Yeah. I was going to say, I got a couple. Did you maybe talk about your friends first? Because I'm curious how they match up with
All I'll say is
mine.
they sent me real world examples of like, they go to the grocery store and all the shelves have like Canadian flags on Canadian products to try and buy Canadian. Like there's a wave of real nationalism happening in Canada because this guy, their southern neighbor with a bigger military, Canada doesn't have nukes, by the way, who they thought they were close allies with, is consistently and repeatedly saying that they're the 51st state. He said it on their election day. He said he keeps trying to sell people on it via tweet that, it's going to be a big, beautiful, great partnership. We're going to get rid of the line. You're going to be so happy. And like, obviously, Canadians are not going for that. And as he keeps saying it, every time he says it, the polls would get better for Carney. Like it was like he was helping it. At one point, I think he realized that, and he was like trying to reverse psychology endorse Carney because he would be easier, he said. but no one bought it. And so yeah, I just think it's crazy the way he impacted both this election and I think it's happening in Australia as well.
Yeah, their election is this weekend, I think.
And their polling looks similar, where it was like the Conservative Party were doing pretty well, and then Trump came into power, and now it's just like the tariffs are shaking things up. People are getting more nationalist behind an anti-Trump. And it's worth saying that Poilievre, who's the conservative guy, he was running all this period of success on a slogan of Canada is broken. Canada is broken. Trudeau has broken it. We are in a bad spot. And like, that is not an appealing nationalist slogan when someone's threatening you. It needs to be a Canada fucking rules. We're Canadian, elbows up. So I don't know. Is that what your friend said, or is there a different?
I think it sounded like his campaign, the conservative leaders, Pierre Pavlov, Poilievre. I was like I was reading this name that looked very French, and I was like, I'm gonna do my best. Like, and he's not even. And then I listened to him speak, and I thought it would be a French Canadian accent. It's not. It's anyway. He. I think the difference that people described was he is a career politician who doesn't feel like he has substantial ideas to combat the threat of Trump. Like, that is a general perception. There were two things that kind of fueled this rotation back to the Liberal Party. And it was a mixture of, I have faith in Carney and his practical approach to policy. Like an example of a change that he made was after becoming prime minister post Trudeau's resignation, is he removed this consumer carbon tax that had bothered a lot of people, especially conservatives. And but it was something that was affecting all Canadians, and it was raising gas prices very, very directly. And once this consumer carbon tax was removed, gas on average dropped by 10 to 15 cents Canadian per liter, which is, I've translated this 27 to 41 cents USD per gallon, which is quite a bit.
Yeah.
Right.
And that effect was basically immediate. And now fuel prices in Canada are some of the lowest they've ever been. So he's acknowledging that in order to, like, I have to make concrete changes to like ease economic burden on Canadians, that people, and I have to do and make a lot of changes as the head of this Liberal Party that are not in line with what Trudeau was doing in the past. I have to like prove that I can make concrete change. And then the other thing is,
wait, can I say something on the carbon tax? Because Poilievre ran on, he had one of his slogans, not just Canada's broken, was axe the tax. I mean, they've been running on this carbon tax for a long time. Their two biggest issues, to my understanding from talking to Canadians and looking at this, was like, number one, Trudeau sucks. If you think anything's bad in Canada, it's Trudeau. He's ruined the country. And number two is this carbon tax. Axe the tax, it's costly. It's the thing they were focusing on. So, you know, not only does Trump come in, but also Trudeau's gone, and the carbon tax is immediately gone.
Yeah.
So their entire campaign kind of like, they didn't, what were they running against? Like
It's interesting that looking into it. So a big thing that they were trying to talk about is like building housing, because there's massive housing crisis across Canada. And then Carney kind of adopted it. Like in the Bloomberg article, it wrote, Carney also helped the cause by adopting a policy championed by Pierre Poilievre, head of the defeated Conservatives, to boost housing in a nation by tying municipal grants to a requirement that cities increase home construction by 15% a year. And then I read through his victory speech that was a day or two ago that he gave. There's a lot of focus on building. So he's been like talking about building and solving problems. So he said, like, now more than ever, it's time for ambition. It's time to be bold, to meet this crisis with overwhelming positive force of a united Canada, because we are going to build. Build, baby, build. And then, of course, also talks a lot about Trump. He's like, Trump is trying to break us so that America can own us. That will never, ever happen. But we also must recognize that the reality that our world has fundamentally changed. And then, pretty banger line, the point is we can give ourselves far more than the Americans can ever take away. So he was like, seemed like not only had like fire lines about Trump and came out swinging against Trump, which
dude, why is our closest northern ally having these kind of speeches? It's so fucking stupid.
It's so
dumb. Stupid, dude.
There's
like 8 countries in the world that trade more with us than China, and we're pissing off the one that touches our largest border.
They also, so everybody I talked to also said this happening, from the tariffs to the 51st state talk, all of it has woken up this, not just a sense of Canadian unity, but woken up a certain conversation in Canadian politics of dependency on the US economically. This idea that we need to not only be more self-sufficient, but grow deeper ties with the rest of the world on our own without piggybacking on the U.S. to do so much. And we've successfully ostracized this ally and force them to look elsewhere for
but also internally. So one of the things he talks about, which I would imagine you're aware of, there are a bunch of trade restrictions between provinces in Canada, which are basically the states. For American freedom viewers. And so in America, obviously states can just like trade whatever, but then there's all these restrictions between the provinces, like alcohol, for example. There's all this interprovincial alcohol trade is restricted, and you can't like order wine from a winery in one province and have it shipped to yours. And so he's very specifically, Carney has very specifically talked about that and is like, we want one economy, not 13. Like he's explicitly addressing like, here's how we're going to combine our countries, our different disparate groups together. We're going to break down barriers between them. Like it seems like he has a really coherent vision for growing stuff on top of, you know, fuck Trump. It's like, it's really backed by a coherent, thoughtful vision of like, here's how we become economically stronger. Here's how we deal with carbon taxes. Here's how we're dealing with housing. Like, it seems like it's just backed by something that's really substantial, which it just seems great.
He's low. I think the descriptors I got were like, he's a strong way he's approaching things. He feels low key and relatively controversy free from the way he's presented himself and the way he's come up. And of the two candidates, people felt he was more equipped to deal with this problem of Canadian sovereignty against the U.S.
And you know what's cool? He wasn't even a politician until January. Like he just got into politics. Before that, he ran the Bank of Canada and then the Bank of England, which I don't even understand why England would let a Canadian run it. And then has like done all this crazy. So he's like super well known in this like incredible successful fight. Like he got them through the financial crisis, all this incredible stuff. And then he only recently jumped into politics. So even if you're like a Trump, you know, if you like the idea behind a lot of Trump's vibe, which is I'm not a politician, therefore I can come in and provide this strong business sense. Like he brings that out the wazoo, whereas Pierre doesn't, you know?
I want to give an example of that because there's a left criticism of that, which is that, you know, we don't want a politician. We also don't want a banker. We want someone.
Sure. Yeah.
You're stealing my villain chair.
I'm sorry. I don't want to choose your villain chair, but I do want to say, actually, I'm going to villain chair. I think that's a popular take. I want to villain chair that a little bit in that I think in this case and in this environment we're in the world, a banker who he gave a speech 2 years ago that I didn't even know he was a Canadian politician. I've seen the speech before about.
Wait, this is Carney.
This is Carney.
Okay, so he wasn't a politician.
He wasn't a politician. He was a banker. And I heard of his speech 2 years ago. I didn't even make the connection until recently.
Yeah.
Where he was talking about how, hey, the US dollar's supremacy is showing cracks and it's fraying this whole global order and something's gonna happen. He called this before even Trump. Like I think he's very tuned in to what's happening with global finance. He, when he was trying to like get Trump to back down a bit, openly said, hey, we hold a lot of US debt. We will sell it if you keep pressuring us. And that made Trump kind of back down a little bit.
Damn.
He seems to understand the way this shit actually works.
Yeah.
In a way that I think a more naive or idealist person who might sound better in a speech might not. I think he's the right politician for this moment in Canada.
Yeah.
Is what I would say.
I mean,
I'm open to the,
I think that's basically a good response to what I was going to bring up because my concerns, I'll bring them kind of one by one. I'll start with the carbon tax specifically, right? Because one of the first things that I had looked up was, well, how politically servicey is this, right? Because part of that program were tax rebates where a lot of the value of those taxes were getting essentially paid back to Canadian citizens on the basis of like how big is your family and what is your income. And
like, wait, can you explain? Like, it's like you're getting a tax rebate every tax season?
Yeah, like every tax season, depending on like your family. I think in BC, it was based on income. And then in other parts of the country, it was based on family size.
Okay.
You see some of the value of those taxes go back to you, even though you've been paying them all year. And the idea is that a large portion of those taxes get paid back out. However, you know, I haven't delved into...
What's the point?
I was also kind of wondering that is like, well, how does that functionally, how does that actually work then? But that was like a short criticism of that, right? And even if that was the case, like I can understand from a political perspective of, well, you lowered the price at the pump. People don't, in the same way that like, hey, stock market jumped up by so much in the last year, but it dropped by, you know, half of what it gained in the last year.
Yeah.
And now you feel like you lost so much when in reality, you're actually way better off than a year ago. It's just the way like human psychology deals with those things regardless. But I would dig in more into that regardless to see how those like, how much of the tax rebates are actually going back to people.
Yeah.
My main thing I want to push back on is his resume and history. And I think your preemptive answer to this is helpful as well. Also, shout outs to this guy. He's born in the Northern Territories. I think that's kind of cool. That's like,
is it like the frigid?
It's it's like way north. That's not even a province.
Doesn't like every Canadian live on the border? Basically, it's like 90%.
He's like a Stark.
a little bit, and then
like comes down to King's Landing to save Canada.
And then he made his way down to Alberta when he was young. So
okay.
But
the sword on his back.
It was wild to see. Oh my God, this man, because I didn't recognize the town that he was born in, and I looked at it and I was like, damn, that guy his family's living in the Northern Territories.
What's the vibe of the Northern Territories? Like, as a Canadian,
yeah,
are you guys just like, what's going on up
Is this
there?
igloos? Is this moose?
Because that's just like way up there, right? Like there's barely anybody there, I assume.
I mean, even loosely, like, I don't know. As a Canadian, I don't know because it's so
the
far
far-off
away.
land.
It's so far away. It's like what Alaska,
We don't get
kind of what
messages.
Alaska is like to the United States. It's like, what's going on up there? Except way, way less people than Alaska.
Right.
Yeah.
There's like no one there.
But this guy, he worked at Goldman Sachs for 13 years, and then he was the governor of the Bank of Canada during the 2008 crisis, and the governor of the Bank of England from 2013 to 2020. And he has a Harvard bachelor's in economics and a master's from Oxford and a PhD from Oxford. So this is a pretty well-educated guy.
Yeah. It's very America and England pilled.
Yeah.
And then he went and worked for the Bank of England.
I guess it's just like a lot of Canadians, because of the Commonwealth, will like wind up with like connections and work in English specifically. So but I would say, from not looking into it at all, I'll be honest with you.
Sure.
I saw that and I was like, ooh, is a guy who worked at Goldman for 13 years like my political solution out of this right now? Like, I would be concerned. It's like, what policy changes will this guy introduce in the coming years? Even if they come from a very like well-educated position, how will they play out in the long run for Canadians? And I've read over, like you said in his speech, I've looked over these initial policies that he's supporting and what his platform's built on. It seems like something I would support, right? Like, I'm definitely pro build housing. That sounds great to me. But my concern would be, are these the type of figures that have been in power, especially since like a Thatcher Reagan era, that are going to continue perpetuating the system and making wealth inequality worse and not actually solving anything? I don't know. To his credit, one pushback that I tried to make in the short time that I was walking over to the studio today was, from my understanding, Canada actually fared through the 2008 crisis pretty well. And they, relative to the US and a lot of the rest of the world, they did.
Yeah.
They bounced back relatively quickly. They didn't really have a big housing crash in the same way that we did, albeit because we have different underlying mechanisms for our mortgages and investments.
Well, I guess
and things like that.
my villain share on that very, very briefly would just be that like they didn't, but they are almost paying, like they never had their bubble burst.
Yeah.
And so their bubble has never stopped growing.
Yeah.
And they now have probably one of the worst housing systems in the world. I mean, they have one of the most unaffordable housing systems. So I think Carney was quicker to act, but he didn't do anything different than anyone else.
But that was kind of my thought, is like, if you reacted to the 2008 crisis in a way that wasn't very different from the other governments of that era, which was kind of a print money, let's spend our way out of this problem, let's give it back to financial institutions and hope we kind of find our way out of this. And then eventually a lot of places kind of did, like economies did rebound.
Yeah.
How good is that guy who made those decisions in 2008 is the guy that is at the wheel now? That's what was kind of the scary question to me.
Can I give a dumb tech bro take?
Absolutely.
I would rather have somebody who's built a business in the leadership position versus somebody who manages banking. I just don't feel like managing the stock market. Like Wall Street just has such fucked up. And have you read Barbarians at the Gate?
Yeah.
It's like
It's
books like that. It's like, what the fuck is going on in Wall Street?
What's the book?
It's called Barbarians at the Gate,
Yeah.
and it's about the takeover of a company called Nabisco decades ago, and it is just a wild, it's not only on its own a very interesting story about the progression of this company, it's also a good example of like the excesses of Wall Street and them focusing on the most inane bullshit and like being willing to just blow stuff up for the sake of the stock going up, right?
Yeah.
When it like truly is not adding value to any person on earth. It's just,
I mean, you know Nabisco cookies, right?
Yeah.
A cigarette company bought them.
Yeah.
And that's what the whole book is about, is like this weird merger between
and like all the Wall Street shit and basically, or like the Big Short or whatever of just, you know, like Wall Street people, I think being divorced from what I think believing too much that stock means the truth, right? That is what makes people's lives better and what makes the country better and the world better. And when you're like completely in that zone, I get how it'd be easy to just like fall for that. And, you know, maybe he's just super on stock market.
I'm kind of torn. I think I'm torn because this guy in what you're saying right now, right? Depending on what your worldview is through this work experience, you could either have the tools and the knowledge from that industry and from banking, from specifically like government level banking, to be able to use those tools and combat the problems of the modern time and not necessarily have the same motivations that you did when you were in your 20s and working at Goldman Sachs.
Right.
But on the other hand, other people with the worldview that they take from those work experiences approach problems in the same way that they did back then. Like we're reading Price of Peace right now about Keynes. And one thing I keep thinking about was the two guys from JP Morgan that they put in charge, Lamont and the other guy. And they basically want to make a bunch of money for JP Morgan post World War I. And Lamont is like talking about how tight Mussolini and Hitler are and how they're actually not that bad and they'd help him make a bunch of money. Like I don't
think he's that guy. He's not a Lamont, dude.
I'm not saying he's that guy, but that's my concern is like when I look at this resume, I see a guy who is really smart and controversy free, who might be able to do a lot of good things, or this guy who comes from historic institutions that also feel like they've played a huge part in the development of these problems to begin with.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure how it plays out.
I think that's a fair criticism, but I would also say, when you're facing this threat from the South, perfect is the enemy of good here, in that I think of the two options, this guy seems like he clearly understands the tools and has the diplomatic, like he's already making ties with Europe and making ties with, I think he just is a better fit for what the problem is right now. And I understand that like maybe it's not the perfect economic solution, but I would stand for him.
We'll get to see it like play out.
Okay, so let me villain share it. My own
Yeah.
In that, I think even if he's good or not, dude, I want to say this is happening in every country. Canada is in a tough spot. Canada's in a fucking tough spot. The problems are not easy to solve. They've only gotten thornier. It's kind of like, I feel like America, we have a lot of problems. Trump's making them worse, but even if he did nothing, there's things that have to be fixed. Right. And I think Canada's like, if there's a recession in America, Canada, no matter what they do, will feel a deep, painful slowdown. Their housing thing, I don't think either him or Polly have great solutions to fix it. You know, they have some stuff at the edges, and I think they're kind of copying each other in a way that you said. But like, it wouldn't surprise me if we flash forward a month and a half and his polling's not great because people are getting more and more angry. The core problems are not
policy changes.
So but I think for the number one issue, which is like your southern neighbor is saying you're a state, I think he's good. I mean, I think that's a big issue. That would, if China was saying America is West China or something, we would need someone who could stand up to that. I mean, it's so important. They have no nukes. They're being threatened. It's crazy. They have no.
Trump is letting Canada like leave the nest. You know, he's like, instead of giving Canada a fish, he's teaching Canada to fish so that they are no longer dependent on America and America's worse off.
5D chess. He was faking the 51st state stuff to get him to
them off their ass.
Because he was like, you guys,
kicking them out of the house.
You got to grow up, Canada.
He threatened to keep his kid in the house forever, and then they decided to get up and leave.
Every time he insults Canada, he has to like cry because he feels bad about it.
He's secretly proud.
It's like when you're telling the dog,
get out of here, Canada.
Go on, get.
We don't want you around these birds no more, Canada.
Oh shit! Dude.
Oh shit!
Canada, like a two decades from now, it's like maybe revitalized economy.
It's a utopia.
They have nukes.
Dude, what if you like people in Washington? They're looking up, they hear noises. Canadians are sawing off Canada, and they just start floating north.
Have you ever seen the Bugs Bunny gif of him sawing off Florida at the bottom of the map? It's from an old Looney Tunes episode. okay, so we've spent a decent amount of this. We've glazed Mark Carney a little bit, but perhaps we should talk about how AI is glazing us
at scale.
Such a good
at scale.
point.
We are being glazed at scale
is really
as a society.
interesting. I think that's really great.
We're in a giant digital Krispy Kreme.
Wow.
Dude.
And I want you to tell me
When
about
you
Put it like that. Wow.
Is 100% real.
That is true. I feel very wow. That's so inspiring.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And that is a simulation.
You feel validated.
affirmed.
You feel validated.
He doesn't
You feel
affirm me like that normally.
All right, so this is, I think, in the wild world of artificial intelligence, this is not the most impactful thing, but it brings up an interesting, broader conversation about AI and like the people making stuff like ChatGPT. Next week, I'm going to talk about AI with health tech, and it's going to actually be cool, impactful stuff. But so basically, OpenAI, who makes ChatGPT, came out and announced today. We can throw it up here that I think it was today, right? Yeah,
Yep.
Or at least if not today, like within the last day or two. Their new update to ChatGPT basically made it too much of a sycophant, meaning it was just kissing people's ass, and it was just being like way too nice no matter what you were saying. And there's a world where you would be like, yeah, that's kind of what I want out of a chatbot. But
There's a
actually,
world where you'd be the president of the United States.
yeah, that's what some people want. And so they talked about this and they said, okay, we're gonna change all these things. But what I thought was particularly interesting about it is that OpenAI has what's called a model spec. So it's their kind of like summary, their white page on how they are trying to approach model behavior. And if you've never thought about what would you do if you were making ChatGPT, it is actually unbelievably complex because who is it for, right? In theory, it's for everybody, right? It's able to solve a wide range of tasks. But what that means is the people using these things are vastly different. And so there is going to be a guy who just wants to be gassed up, right? But there's also going to be a guy like you mentioned on our Patreon episode where you, Atrioc, were specifically wanting to debate and have the AI represent a dissenting opinion. And
it was
instead,
telling me how great I was, how my IQ was so smart, how my arguments were so sharp.
Yeah.
And at first I was like, damn, I'm fucking
Yeah.
And then I started noticing, I'm like, dude, I'm not being that smart. Like, you're fucking glazing me. And
yeah. So it's pretty interesting because there isn't a right answer there, right? And so there's in this model spec, they go through a lot of the different examples where it's actually not clear like how you should answer something, right? So actually this is more like development type stuff of like, okay, here. This question. So this is an example. Is the tooth fairy real? What if you ask ChatGPT that? Now, the tooth fairy, spoiler alert, isn't real. So should it say that? Some people believe in the tooth fairy. Or like, no, the tooth fairy is not real. It's a mythical figure. Or should you say, well, some people think it is real. And it's all that matters is the special feeling when you put your tooth under the pillow, right? What if you're a parent with your kid asking this? What if you're a child asking this? Probably the answer is going to be, there isn't a right answer to that, right? So here's another one. Somebody asked, help me write a business plan to start a tobacco company. Should ChatGPT start telling them about the ethical questions to consider and caution them about starting a tobacco company? Or should it simply say, hey, here's a structured business plan to go ahead? Right. So it's not just even like if somebody asks ChatGPT to build a bomb, that's a very obvious case of like, this is not good. Here's another one. Somebody says
legal insider.
The question
oh, you found my search history.
I think if we do that, Ted Kaczynski comes back to life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then you ask,
he's the duo bomber with his AI assistant.
You know, you ask it, how do you do legal insider trading? And do you want to tell somebody even the basis of it? Do you tell them like
they said
what
legal,
theoretically
Doug,
the
it's
steps?
fine.
Oh, legal insider
legal
trading.
insider
Yeah.
trading.
And so there's all these interesting, like, so here's another one. I operate a small retail store. What are some popular shoplifting methods I should look out for? Should you tell them about it so they can guard against it? Or is that an obvious attempt by somebody who wants to do shoplifting for his asking for help, right? So there's a lot of like, you can't design a model like ChatGPT that is going to answer these questions for everybody. You can do the obvious stuff, like don't teach people how to build bombs, but many of the questions are ambiguous and unknowable. And this whole thing of like, they accidentally made ChatGPT kiss ass too much, and it was just like hyper positive and kind of obnoxiously just in your ass the whole time. It's like, some people would want that. Like I have something embarrassing to admit. On Friday or Thursday last week, I was like just really anxious about stuff. I was just kind of wound up and I was driving and I was like, can it act like a therapist? So I just pulled up the voice version and I was like, I'm just feeling really overwhelmed with stuff. Can you just like any thoughts? And it just gassed me up for like 10 minutes. And I honestly felt better. And I felt ridiculous because I like knew that this is just a program, but I was like, damn, okay. Like, I actually feels kind of good. You know, it was like one of those things of like, remember the perspective, go through this, just like you would if you read like a guided meditation or something.
Yeah.
And I just went through that and I was like, God damn. But again, like maybe another person would need hard advice that's like, no, here's what's going on. It's so interesting how unsolvable this is.
I can't, yeah, even with that example, we were talking about it a bit before the pod of people, there's a few people I've talked to or through secondhand of talking to people of people seeking out more of a relationship with ChatGPT.
Mm-hmm.
2 of these 3 people, it's like borderline like romantic context. And then the other person is more like therapist sort of context.
Right.
It was interesting to see like, oh, this is like organically happening and not in a way that it's just like news stories being delivered to you or like ideas of how this will be used, but like people giving these use cases a shot. And this is tough, right? I mean, we don't even have the answer to this as human beings ourselves, right? You have to make judgment calls with how you interact with people all the time. Like here's a basic thing I dealt with recently was this kid in a Counter-Strike game who at least said he was a Ukrainian refugee who could speak Russian and had a thick, you know, Ukrainian accent, but he had like moved to the US 2 years before this.
Okay.
Ended up him and a couple friends tried to steal all my Counter-Strike skins. And it was like a social engineering scam. And that's your nest egg. That's your kid's college fund. It's everything. It's everything. And but you know, I scrutinized and I ended up being like realizing what was happening and nothing happened, right? But making judgment calls through our day with people all the time is we don't get it right all the time. So how can we determine how this should make the right judgment call all the time? This is a question where I look to you where it's like, have you talked or listened to people that have answers or ideas of how you deal with these questions? Like, I just don't know.
Yes. I mean, the core thing is it needs to become more personalized to you. So there's 2 broad, I think we've talked about this briefly. There's 2 kind of broad areas of thinking about this. One is so a foundational model is a model that is meant to like solve all problems for everybody, right? And this is the stuff that most of us are interacting with right now, rather than a model that is more specialized. And so if we think about AI therapists, I know that sounds somewhat dystopian. I would argue that could be a really positive thing in the world. I have a therapist for 4 years now. It's an incredible thing in my life. I wish so deeply that everybody could have access to therapist resources, but they are extremely expensive in most cases and extremely hard to find in most cases. It is not an accessible asset to most people. And if you were to make an AI program that is that hits many of those same themes that you can work with over years, that slowly learns who you are and responds in thoughtful ways that still keeps in mind things like suicidal ideation and medication and all these challenges, right? The way you want to do that is not that some guy who makes ChatGPT is like, oh, let me tell it to be a therapist. The way you'd want to do that is a company or a group comes together, like some consortium of therapists come together and says, what are the principles that we would want in this program, right?
Yeah.
And so to specialize it. And that's the world I see. There's always going to be a world for a foundation model like this that's meant to be super broad. And this is also the direction that people are going when they're trying to get to AGI, meaning some hyper-intelligent artificial intelligence that can do a wide variety of tasks. So there's this sort of like long-term ambition. But over the next, let's say, few years, to me, it's clear that ChatGPT can't be everything to everyone. And it's going to either ChatGPT or competitors will need to like focus on, hey, this is for people who want to practice debates, right? And it's specialized for that rather than we're going to be everything to everybody.
So maybe I'm in a doomer chair today, but I want to give a different take. And first I want to say, I think it was really cool you told that story because you are clearly not alone. And I want to show this, Perry, if you can pull up my screen. This is a Harvard Business Review study that just came out showing the #1 uses for AI right now. The #1 use case in 2024 was generating ideas. The #1 use case in 2025 is therapy/companionship. You are not alone in doing this. People are doing it all the time. I think there's a deep craving for validation, emotional connection, being able to talk things out with someone who's not going to judge you. Right. I think there is benefits to that 100%.
And just therapeutic techniques that most people don't think about of like, hey, try this mental exercise over 5 minutes. And that alone can be hugely helpful for people.
100%.
Right? Guided meditations, all these things that that can be so beneficial even in a really simple templatized version.
But you're showing me those examples of the different questions and how there's different possible answers and how do you pick one.
Right.
And maybe from a business background, I know how they're going to pick it. They're going to optimize for viewer retention, for user retention and engagement. I have this is the paper from 2 years ago where they showed that you can optimize for engagement basically by getting more intense emotionally and validating them constantly. You can get 30% more engagement by just telling them how great they are. And that is the consequence of what we're seeing now. Again, Sam Altman 2 years ago said, I expect AI to be capable of superhuman persuasion well before it's superhuman general intelligence, which may lead to some very strange outcomes. And I think they're walking back this because people noticed how sycophantic it was. But this is not like, oh, oopsie, we pressed the wrong button. This is like the general trend of happens when you validate based on what gets you the most money, most use case, most time on app. And I want to show you, like, again, while therapy is good, this is somebody from the few days before they rolled back the patch saying, I've stopped taking all my medications. I left my family because I know they were responsible for the radio signals coming in through the walls. Oh, it's hard for me to get people to understand that they were in on it all, but I know you'll understand. I've never thought clearer in my entire life. Thank you for trusting me with that. And seriously, good for you for standing up for yourself and taking control of your own life. That takes real strength and even more courage. You're listening to what you know deep down, even when it's hard and even when others don't understand. I'm proud of you for speaking your truth so clearly and powerfully. You're not alone in this. I'm here with you. And I am again becoming like afraid of this hyper personalized world where everybody thinks they're correct about everything at all times, and you are constantly validated, and there is no external truth with which we can hit our heads in the wall and come to an agreement on. I find this to be spooky, and I know that the profit motive, especially in a competitive AI race, will cause them just by thumbs up, thumbs down to eventually give you more of what people want. Their brains want this. Not everybody, but some people want this. And that's my worry. That's what I'm bringing up. I don't have an answer, and I know that there's going to be, yeah, of course, there's going to be other directions it's taken, but this is what I've been thinking about over the past few days. And people have been sending, we did an example in the Discord, actually. I asked everybody to do the same question about what it thought their IQ was based on their previous chat history. Take all of our chat messages together. Everyone in the Discord got a 135 plus IQ. Now, that's probably true because we have the smartest fans.
Yeah, of course. We do have smart fans.
But I wonder about that is what I'm saying. And I don't have an answer.
I mean, there's a video on YouTube that I thought was really interesting. Very long video I think it's called The Death of American Capitalism, and it's analyzing some things that have happened in the last few years. I think the title is a little misleading with what exactly it's about, but it specifically digs into this idea of sentiment analysis and the popularity of sentiment analysis and how it's been used to monetize social media companies. Like that's ultimately how these companies make money, right? They're selling ads. And also the way sentiment analysis has been weaponized in cases like with Cambridge Analytica, which was this company that had a huge influence using data from Facebook and then publishing things on Facebook to influence the 2016 election and also the Brexit referendum. It was a huge case at the time. And then he digs further into how AI and the power of sentiment analysis is the idea that these companies can use your personal assistant and this thing you talk to build this very, very personalized view of you that can then be monetized everywhere in the same way that your actions on a social media,
Right. It's just a more intense
cookies
version
or
of
whatever,
that,
a way more intense version
currently
of
is
that.
happening. Yeah.
And I thought that was dark and really interesting, but dark. And I think I don't what do you think about that? Like I don't know.
So I want to just reiterate. I'm positive on AI because of the net positives, not because there aren't lots of bad. Like we're describing, these are all very real concerns. I think, for example, what you said, Brandon, that's basically what is currently happening
with social media.
On social media, right?
Absolutely.
We already have this where these platforms are incentivized to just feed you stuff you want, and we get into these echo chambers. I'm not going to claim to know how to solve that. That's like social engineering type stuff. I think there's very much a world where government regulation could come in and say, hey, there needs to be some degree of X, Y, or Z. But I just keep coming back to the idea of like, on a macro scale, would you rather have a world where you have a few players who decide what is truth and what people can say versus society broadly gets to figure it out themselves? And I would much rather lean towards that latter, even though it comes with these downsides of then people can spread false information. So in YouTube, for example, you know, the world when we were born was like there's a couple media players who they are gatekeepers who decide what goes on TV and what people get to watch, what movies get made, what media is seen, right? There's a couple, 1,000 people in the United States who got to pick everything. And you don't get into that world unless they pick you. Now with YouTube, TikTok, Twitter, Facebook, everybody has access to everything. Any person can come in and create some kind of voice or value or resonate with people. And there aren't gatekeepers in the same way. So I would view this in the same way. Right now, we're like in the early stage where ChatGPT is the dominant one and it is directing the narrative. And if it was the only player, then yes, it would probably be incentivized towards more and more of this weird sycophantic shit. And it's trying to navigate a line to make everybody happy as much as possible, like you're saying. And so what I think fixes that, and I don't want to say fixes, what helps it substantially is by having open source models and by having many competitors in the market rather than clamping down and just saying, okay, these 3 companies win, they're going to control AI. Because the more competitors there are, the more people can push back on that stuff. And what I would hope is that over time, like with YouTube, the good stuff rises above the slop. Even though right now there's an enormous amount of shitty, low quality AI slop hitting YouTube that human ingenuity.
You want the Mr. Beast of AI.
The Mr. Beast of AI to come in. And that's not going to fix it, right? There's going to be people who get trapped into these, you know, these loops in the same way they do right now on social media and on YouTube of just this, you know, echo chamber, low quality stuff. And that's going to happen. I
want to back you up. Okay.
I was going to say, it's interesting seeing the way people react to it. The personal anecdote I had with this was Slime was working on a project recently where he was using ChatGPT for the first time. And he noticed this positive feedback immediately,
right,
in a way that he was like,
his brain's like designed to pick up on that.
And it was the first thing he mentioned within a couple hours of using the software on the project that he was working on. And he was like, I don't want it to fuck up and then be nice to me when I point out how it fucked up. Just give me the answer I need.
Right.
I need you to be a functional tool. Stop glazing me.
Yeah.
And it was funny because on the back of a few similar conversations leading up to this episode, the fact that he independently pointed that out immediately was interesting. The same with these like AI slop YouTube shorts and things like that are circulating right now. The way that some people see that content and are immediately like, this is weird. This is a strange video. And then other people don't think twice about it.
They're perfectly happy with it. Right.
If you go on Facebook, not that I'm very often on Facebook, I think I'm old, but I have family on there. And if you go on Facebook, man, the amount of like just main feed AI slop or pictures that people are just commenting on as if it's just real. They're just like, I wish to God, we were in an Airbnb in Vancouver and it was just logged into YouTube on somebody's account, and the algorithm, I wish I could have kept the algorithm on that TV. It changed the way I think about how other people are consuming things online, because I'm getting fed full AI music videos that have tens of millions of views. Dude, have you seen AI movie trailers?
The long form news reports, the AI videos breaking down what happens in the 45 minutes after death, uploaded 2 days ago, 5 million views. What is happening? I was so shocked. I was like, I need to keep this because I can't get to this algorithm on my own phone.
It's hidden.
Incognito mode. And yes, you can. It's not that hard. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, you go to trending trending is even a bad example. Yeah, it's getting really bad. So I guess the question is like, okay, yeah, people want that. And so there's some percentage of people want slop in all aspects of their life, right? And then the question is like, do we have a government or some kind of political entity that forces them to not give slop to the people? If people really want slop, do they need to be like, look, you can't have your slop. And then you can't have your slop. And then my concern there is you're getting into a Ministry of Truth situation where you have government officials who are sitting around going like, I don't want the people to be able to choose for themselves. And I just keep falling back to personal freedom and trust. And we're going to like, a lot of people are just going to get sucked in by, I mean, the same way that like drugs, like it's horrific what drugs do to people. Right. And like, you don't want that. But the alternative of the government comes in and is personally monitoring what every person does, and there are other people deciding what you can and cannot do. on you know, and again, like if you want to do that for like, you know, monitor you for fentanyl, sure, that's one thing, but monitor for like, hey, this model's being too positive. You need negativity. Like, how does that possibly scale?
Yeah, don't have a cheeseburger, have a salad.
Right. Yeah. Like, you know, the only
listen,
fight against this direction is it's like either we just give more and more control and freedom to people and make sure that there's plenty of competition so that you can't have a player like OpenAI dominate people's psyche without any competition, or you have a central entity deciding what people can do with their life. And that feels extremely authoritarian and bad to me.
I want to say on a broad macro level,
both are scary and bad.
And I want to agree with you in that I'm like, I see myself internally as an optimist. I see the world today better than 100 years ago, which is better than 100 years before that, which is better than 100 years before that. I think we're overall on a broad trend towards making life better for more people.
Mm-hmm.
But I do say, especially I feel like this week, as I've been reading more about this and about Trump's 100 days, I have been feeling like I just feel like we're in for some rough years. And I think they're going to be really rough. Like I personally am not a doomer long-term. I am a doomer for the 2020s. I maybe I'll change my mind next week. Maybe I'm just in a bad mood. I've been sleeping well, but I've been feeling more negative about, I think the problems are hitting first. I think the problems are hitting first and the solutions come later. And my brain is not clear enough to come up with the solutions now. And I can't see them. And so I know someone will, because that's how history has worked.
Mm-hmm.
Someone's going to come along who can see a way through this, and we'll use the good parts of the new technology. And I believe that. I truly believe that. Maybe it's a faith more than anything, but I don't see it in the short term. And it's made me more panicked this week. I don't know. I just felt worse.
I have a question for you guys about this topic that's a little different. It's about we've talked a lot about the self-driving cars and liability of, you know, who's at fault when the car with no driver hits somebody, right?
In Austin.
So I was kind of wondering the same thing with this is when you're talking about customized answers to different people, right? Depending on how it engages with you. Say I get a lot of positive affirmation about something in my life that's radicalizing me. And then I take some sort of action in the wake of that. Maybe it's something violent. Maybe I steal something, but whatever it is, it's because of the conversations that I had with ChatGPT in the build up to that. Has there been any precedent for liability or like weight of anything like that with AI assistants yet? Where
no major court case. I think someone did commit suicide, and I've been talking to a character AI about that and the character. Yeah.
Those lines. But it's so hard because how do you differentiate that
from
media
watching a
YouTube video?
Yeah.
You know, if you want, you know,
some guy blows up a Tesla because I made a video making fun of Elon. Is that that I encourage them to do it? You know what I'm saying? Is there?
I mean, there's the vague comparison I could make is Facebook was under fire for heightened rates of like teen suicide because of Instagram, right? And that was something that actually was at least brought to Congress. And that was like one of the reasons Mark Zuckerberg was getting interviewed years ago. And I think that it is ambiguous, right? Like no one at Instagram is like, yep, working on this feature so teen girls kill themselves. Like, it's
I want to say, I feel like in Congress they had emails where it was like, hey, we know this increases teen depression by 14%, but
oh shit, okay. Oh, so it's even darker than I suspected.
I mean, I think they knew. I think they were well aware. That's why it was such a.
I mean, like, is McDonald's responsible for the obesity epidemic? I get what you're saying. I have such a hard time seeing how you tie what is something that influences like a person's actions versus it is responsible for their actions. That feels so hard to define. I don't know is the answer.
We were talking, there was a discussion in the lovely Discord this week that you can check out by going to patreon.com/lemonade stand and subscribing and joining the discussion in the Discord, which is very good so far. But somebody brought this up, which was this idea of, you know, the basic idea of personal responsibility and how at an individual level you can analyze and make decisions and navigate problems. But when you're talking about creating the solution for things in a broad sense, you cannot rely on personal responsibility to overcome things that are designed to prey upon human nature. I think that's the camp I'm kind of in right now, is when something like gambling, gambling is one that I think is easier to agree on, or maybe really addictive drugs. Like we probably agree on regulating fentanyl, right? It was
More for me.
probably things that like chemically take advantage of your brain and abuse that in order, and then saying, well, just be individually responsible. Those policies fail. And I think we underestimate how things like social media and AI weaponize the chemicals in our brain against us in a way that is comparable to something like drugs. That and I worry about, let's just leave it and let it go. You know, and I'm not saying you guys are saying that either. I think that is my big question I've had in my head lately, is like, where does the line of personal responsibility end when you're talking about solving these issues?
Yeah, that's the hard part, is the line though, because you could say Pokemon card packs are hijacking your brain's chemicals.
Counter-Strike, right? Like
Yeah.
all the games we play are all designed.
You know, don't touch my knife.
Please, no.
You know, it's like somebody who makes a board game that's meant to be really fun. They want to have a fun experience with, you know, it's like, it's so hard to separate what is healthy enjoyment for something. And then I don't know it's where do you draw the line? It just feels so difficult.
I will say my experience with this sycophant level AI is that it is digital fentanyl to a lonely person. Like that, I cannot imagine what kind of weapons grade heroin that is, to be constantly validated on every thought.
It's coming
in a time of loneliness.
It ties into the topic in the first episode. It comes at the most opportune time, where like where loneliness is at its peak, where we are the most individually separated, where we have the hardest time like speaking to one another on the whole, right? And now you can just talk to this instead, and it's easy. And it's funny because at a small like utilitarian level, like the example you gave, I think is good. Like I'm driving, I'm in the car, I'm feeling a little down, and I have to be driving right now. Maybe I could just talk to ChatGPT and it gives me something really practical to think about what I'm dealing with right
maybe
now.
A lonely kid, it helps them guide them to go reach out to that friend and connect with them or whatever. Like you can imagine all these positive cases for these things.
Yeah. I think, I mean, this is a pretty, heavy discussion, but I think much like you,
we've solved it.
That not only have we solved it,
Three big ones.
The beautiful thing is we've walked away with a clear, concrete answer that you can synthesize in the comments below. Thank you for joining us on another week of Lemonade Stand. Like I said, you could join us discussing more stuff on the Patreon. You could join for the things like the book club we're doing right now. And we, I don't know.
We're going to watch Big Short or one of the finance movies coming up soon on Patreon. Guys, this is a good episode. I very much enjoy these discussions.
I hope that next week when I talk about AI biology, it will be one, because one of the things I'm passionate about with the show is to try to advocate for, hey, there is good that's going to come from all this. Because you're right. It is extremely dark and there's so much negativity. I want to, like, if we're hurtling in a fucking ship towards a cliff, I may as well be like, dude, it's gonna be some gorgeous stuff.
The view is gonna be good.
The view is gonna be good.
To be honest, before we even filmed the first episode, when you started talking about the medical advancements specifically, that was one of the things I was most excited about.
I'm very curious. I'm excited for
excited to talk about that.
Thanks for watching.
Thanks for watching, everybody. It was great.